Now, I gotta go look at the suspects. Was it you, Macy? Let's see your face. Did you do this? Did you do this? Denver, did you do this? Denver, was this you? Look at me. Come here. Let me see. Let me see your face. Oh my goodness, Denver, you didn't. You did this? What? You got into Kitty Cat's treats while I was gone?
Good morning, everyone. We invite you to come in and have a seat, and if someone that's standing back there would not mind closing those doors here and here, that would be greatly appreciated. Of course, we welcome Mark back for his last presentation. It's been an enjoyable and informational presentation during the month of October. Hope you all had happy Thanksgiving, had a lot to eat, enjoyed family and the holiday. Have announcement, we are starting our collection for Children's Home Christmas. So there's 3 different envelopes, and I will pass these out. And if you do not mind contributing, if you can, and passing it on to your neighbor, and that will be greatly appreciated. And we will give them one to Robert over here, and he'll give one over there. I'll pass one over here. So help us out, and we turn it over to Mark.
Okay, I think I've got this on. Can people hear me? All right, fantastic. Well, then I guess we'll get going. So let me start out by saying thank you. It's been really nice being back for the last month, at least for me. I'm sure some of you are thinking, yeah, it's the last week. Fantastic. So I do appreciate all of you joining in. I hope if more than anything, that you've been exposed to some things you weren't accustomed to. Now, that's probably one of those phrases that people don't really like to say in church. You know, oh, we got exposed to some things we aren't accustomed to. But honestly, this is stuff you're around every day. It's real life. It is what's going on today. And I'm one of these people who thinks that Jesus, in his teaching, in his walk on the earth, used very modern, very apropos things in society to teach lessons. And it's hard for you to read through the parables and not realize that. So that's one of the things that I was hoping that we could do. And today's going to be a little bit different, as if the last 3 weeks weren't. But to start out today, what I want to do is draw your attention back to 2 Super Bowls ago. Because one of the things that happened 2 Super Bowls ago was kind of interesting. It was two very broad ends of the spectrum. And so what I want to do is I want to show you a commercial that ran during the Super Bowl, not this past one, but the one previous, and see if you recall it. Take a look.
Hi, welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you?
2 hash browns and a small coffee?
You know what, for your payment today, do you have your cell phone with you?
Yeah.
Dial up your mom, tell her you love her.
Excuse me?
Hey, Mom. Just wanted to let you know that I love you.
Te quiero mucho. How about you just tell me how much it is?
That is how much it is. Boom!
Your payment today will be telling me what you love about your son.
I love his compassion for other people.
The total says that she has to dance right now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
That Strawberry Sunday's waiting on you.
For strawberry Sunday.
You paid with love, and that's all we need.
Your total is one big family hug.
Tears, anyone? You're feeling it, right? Just beautiful, wasn't it? Just out of curiosity, how many of you got to pay with Lovin' before February 14th of 2015? Anyone in here? No one got to. I didn't either. I got ripped off. Okay, it kind of irritated me, this promotion where they were going to supposedly say, hey, text your wife and tell her you love her, here's your free Big Mac. It didn't happen to me, all right? It was kind of irritating to me. Well, then there was another commercial. This ran toward the end of the Super Bowl, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you it was for an insurance company, and it was for an insurance company who at the time was a client of mine, okay? And so see if you remember this one.
Hey, wait! Guys, wait! Wait! I'll never learn to ride a bike. Or get cooties. I'll never learn to fly. Or travel the world with my best friend. And I won't ever get married. I couldn't grow up because I died from an accident.
At Nationwide, we believe in protecting what matters most. Your kids. Together, we can make safe happen.
You guys remember that? And you're just grossed out right now, right? I mean, this was a bit of a shock. So you've got these two extremes. You've got McDonald's saying, hey, come and pay with Lovin', and then you've got this other extreme of Nationwide Insurance basically saying, you know, giving everyone this huge downer in the middle of the Super Bowl. I mean, I don't know about you. I tend to be a student of advertising a lot of times. I appreciate that. I'll just take that and just leaving all these donations up here for me. I tend to be a student of advertising. I love to watch the Super Bowl. I love showing my classes the string of Super Bowl commercials that aired. And, you know, if you are like many Americans, half the time you don't care about the game, you watch the commercials. You go get snacks during the game, and then you turn around and you watch the commercials. Well, I thought this was such a stark contrast. I thought, I wonder if I can get any play on this in social media. Okay, so I put a post out there on Facebook, basically as if the advertisers were talking to me. So, to me at McDonald's, your payment is to call your mom and tell her you love her. Isn't that sweet? To me from Nationwide, your mom is dead. I mean, it was such a stark contrast to what people were accustomed to in advertising. And at the time, like I said, one of my clients was Nationwide Insurance. And I dealt with the CMO, the chief marketing officer there, and he survived until June. And then they fired him. And I was walking around the halls of Nationwide Insurance, and in February, I was like, really? And they were like, oh yeah, he's doubled down on this. He really thinks that that's the direction we need to go. And I thought, yeah, let's see what your board thinks. And then in June, they fired him. And they were nice enough to use the phrase of he's gone to pursue other opportunities. But we all know what it was. And I was walking around the halls, and they said, oh yeah, he's no longer here. And I thought, yeah. And so I asked one or two of them, it's because of the Super Bowl ad, isn't it? And they were like, well, they didn't say that, but yeah, it was. I mean, there was such an outcry. There was this social media outcry about this ad, and it was just crazy. And social media and things that you see have this ability to shape what you think about things. So, for example, here is an icon of America, or what has been an icon for many, many years. I mean, we recall, if anyone wanted to tinker around or do anything. In fact, there was a time when a lot of the things in most of our church buildings that were electronic came from Radio Shack. Okay, and you could see the word realistic on any speaker in any given church around America. And then they closed, and somebody got industrious and used a couple of garbage bags and made this. And basically turned a Radio Shack sign into them saying, so long. Because the reality is, this has an impact on all of us. And so what I want to do today is I want to talk about one more impact. of the pace of our life and what we go through, and it's not really a new impact. It's just we feel it more today than we ever had. So I want to just tell you, one of the most dangerous words in all of the English language, to me, one of the most dangerous words in the entirety of the English language is the word someday. Someday. Someday I'm going to be the father I always intended to be. Someday I'm going to quit complaining and I'm going to be grateful. Someday I'm going to get in shape. Someday I'm going to slow down and start enjoying my kids, or maybe now I'm going to enjoy my grandkids. Someday I'm going to get really serious about prayer. Someday I'm going to learn the Bible better than I ever have. Someday I'm going to start to volunteer and work with kids. Someday I'm going to get more organized. You ever said that one? As you were looking in your closet today before you came here? Someday I'm going to take more risks. Someday I'm going to be generous. Someday I'm going to learn to play a musical instrument that I've always thought I wanted to play. Someday, I mean, we do this over and over, don't we? We use that word over and over, and it becomes very, very cheap. It becomes something that is, honestly, something that's very dangerous to us. And the pace of our life makes us start to put things off more than we ever have. Someday when I graduate, someday when I get a job, someday when I find the right one, someday when I get married, someday when I have kids, someday when I retire, someday I'm going to stop waiting and start living. We've all been on the back end of that word, haven't we? And I grew up with this little P word called procrastinating. Now, that may fit some of you, but some of you may have grown out of it. But for me, I was the guy who wrote a term paper the day it was due. Okay? And they were good. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, they were good. So I was the guy who would put off, I don't know about you, I'm like most of America. I am, cleaning my garage is never done. I'm always cleaning my garage. I'm cleaning my garage right now. I've been cleaning my garage for 30 years. Okay? You know how this goes. Someday I'm going to actually go and I'm going to do all of these things. Now, let me give you a little quiz, okay, just to see if you're a procrastinator. And here in a minute, if you have a sheet of paper, those green ones will work if there's any room on it. I'm going to ask you to do something. I actually brought a handout that I was going to photocopy and hand out to you. Didn't work out that way because I procrastinated. So I thought about this little quiz while I was getting this ready last night. Some of you will understand that here in a second. Let me just give you this quiz. Nothing to write down yet, okay? Here in a second I'm going to ask you to. If you've ever had a project around the house that you've been putting off, you may be a procrastinator. If you've ever put off returning a phone call you knew you had to return, but you just didn't do it. If you've ever put off making a doctor's appointment because you thought there might be something wrong with you. You ever had that one? If you've ever been late for an appointment or for a church service. If you missed the first question that I asked because you just got here. Okay? If you've ever gone Christmas shopping on December 24th. If you've ever mailed a tax return on April 15th. If you've ever put off going on a diet because it wasn't Monday yet, okay? Could we just get a collective show of hands? Can we have mass confession? Do any of those fit any of you guys? Once again, how many of you aren't going to raise your hand no matter what I ask? Here's the reality, guys. We have this ingrained trap we can fall into that is someday, or what I will call someday syndrome. We end up procrastinating, and what happens in our society today, with all of the cool stuff we've talked about over the last 3 weeks, is we have so many diversions to pull our attention away from the things we need to focus on that it becomes increasingly easier to fall into this someday syndrome. So here are some truths as far as procrastination. And actually, let me just give you this definition of procrastination, okay? The failure to do what must be done when it needs to be done. Would you agree with that? Is that a fair definition of procrastination? The failure to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. Now, that's something that I've had to deal with in my life. I know that you have too. And so let's kind of walk through a few of the diversions we run into. Here's the reality. You can be a procrastinator and still be a very busy person. I mean, you know that that's the case. You may not be someone like a Kelly Joyner who always knocks everything off his list, okay? He is always on time. The biggest problem with procrastination is that it robs us of our ability to really live. To really live right now and be present in this moment. It just pulls that away from us. It causes us to miss God's voice or to miss feeling His touch in any given moment. Folks, I'm going to tell you, I have started to come to a point in my life where I realize this is bigger than just me putting something off. And let me share with you a scripture that made me realize how much bigger this is. Now, remember our definition, the failure to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. And now let's look at James 4:17. Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him, it is sin. I haven't heard a lot of sermons about this particular verse in my life. This is scary to me. When I lay the definition of procrastination up alongside this passage of Scripture, I'm going to be honest with you, it's a little bothersome to me. Now, read that whole book of James, okay? Get the whole context of what is going on in James. But I'm going to be real honest with you and tell you that when it comes to doing something when it needs to be done, I occasionally need a little push to do some of those things, even when they are uncomfortable. So what I'd like to do is give you 5 things. On that sheet of paper I asked you to grab, I'd like you to write down just 1 through 5, okay? And I'm going to ask you to write a word, and I'll give you the word. I'm going to ask you to write a word, and then I'm just beside that, I'm going to ask you to write yes or no. Real simple. And you're not sharing this with anyone, okay? So don't feel like you got to turn this in. I have no Scantron to give you. This is just real simple, and it's for your own benefit, all right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through 5 personalities that have really started to emerge as we look at this whole idea of procrastination, especially in the modern culture. And I've got to give credit to a great researcher by the name of Linda Sapadin, who came up with all of these, and some of these are adapted from a lot of her work. But let me just walk through these 5. And the first one I'll walk through, and for you to write on your paper, for number 1, is the perfectionist. The perfectionist. These are the folks who don't want to start or finish a task unless it meets impossibly high standards. They don't want to start into something, or they certainly don't want to finish it until it is absolutely, probably never going to get there kind of perfect. Now, that may be familiar to some of you, it may not be, and that's fine if it doesn't. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about that type of personality trait. Are you a perfectionist? Are you the kind of person who, unless you can do it, and I remember hearing my grandfather say, well, no point in starting it if you can't do it right. You know, you ever been there? I remember that, and you know, there is a lot of truth in that, but I have taken that and I have modified it a little bit, and I don't just start it unless I can do it right. I put it out at such a level of expectation that if I can't even get there, if I don't see a roadmap to get there, I don't even start it. I don't even think about it anymore. I mean, it is, you know, that bathroom is just atrocious, and I'll never be able to clean it good enough. So I'm just going to leave it. You know, you think about that kind of mindset. Here's the question. Do I put off doing tasks until I can do them perfectly, or until, and this is a big thing, or until I can find the perfect time to do them? So that's the perfectionist. What I'd like you to do is just beside that word, write yes or no. Does that apply to you? Yes or no? All right? Either one's a fair answer. If no, write no. If yes, put yes. And here's the second. The second of these 5 personalities that I'd kind of like to walk through. The dreamer. The dreamer. These are the folks who want life to work out smoothly. They want it to work out easily. When things are right, they're just going to happen. I mean, if this is you sometimes wait until things are hopeless, and then what do? I mean, these are the folks who, let's face it, if they just think, hey, at some point my bank account's I'm not too good with numbers, I don't want to balance my checkbook. And so they get to a point, and what do? Exactly. They open up another account and close that one because it's too messy to go clean up, right? I mean, it would take a Cliff Farron to go figure that out. And so they actually try and figure out, okay, if it's just got to feel right. It's got to be the right time. For some reason, as I was growing up, my parents would say, it's not quite the right time yet. And I came to understand what that meant. Okay, just like my kids, when I would say, maybe later, my son would start saying, well, that means never, because he knew. I mean, that was the just, here, I'll hand you this token, maybe later, and he knew. He understood that currency. And he would start to say, okay, well, I guess that means we're never going to do anything with this. So here's the question. Do I think too much about things I'd really like to do, but I never really get around to doing them? I'll think about them, I daydream about them, I fantasize about them, but I just don't ever get around to doing them. I've got a to-do list a mile long. I've got things on my refrigerator that I've never scratched through because it just hasn't been the right time. So this is the personality of the dreamer. So write the dreamer down on your paper and just write yes or no. Does that apply to you? Okay? And it's okay. If you've got more than one of these that you circle yes to, that doesn't make you any less of a person. That's fine. Just be honest. Does this apply to you, or has it applied to you at some point in life? Now, here's the third. Oh, and the third one hits me between the eyes, okay? The crisis maker. These are the people who put off what needs to be done until a crisis develops. You been there? You done that? The leak's not that bad, and then the roof falls in. I mean, they don't get motivated until the very last moment. These are the people, if this is you tend to have a psychological need to live on the edge. And you got to understand, when I first got out of school, I worked in the news business, okay? I worked in television. I was, I wanted to think that my last name was Brokaw, but it wasn't, and it just didn't happen for me. But I loved the whole concept of the news business because you couldn't think about, if it was early in the day, if it was noon, you didn't think about the 10 o'clock news. You thought about the 5 o'clock news. The saying in the news business is you feed the 5 o'clock monster, otherwise you won't get a chance to feed the 10 o'clock monster. I mean, you feed the monsters as they come. Well, this is the crisis maker. I tend to work pretty well on deadlines. That's what we like to say, right? The people who suffer from being a crisis maker, we say, I'm just a deadline person. If I don't see the deadline, I'm not going to be able to get motivated to do it. Here's the question. Do I put off doing what needs to be done until a crisis develops? Whatever form that takes. So, on your paper, third one, crisis maker, yes or no, does that apply to you? Now, how about the fourth one? The fourth one, some of you can identify with. This is the defier. The defier. These are the people who feel that imposing any kind of expectation is morally wrong. I don't see where the government gets off telling me I got to pay my taxes on April 15th. I'll pay them when I want to pay them. I'm going to pay them. I just ought to pay them on my time. Or, something like, I'll get done what needs to get done. I'm just going to get it done on my timeline. I'm not going to bend to the will of your timeline. I'll get it done on my timeline. Here's the reality. These are the type of people who feel like procrastination is a way to assert their independence. You know, if I delay, it is because, well, you know, I've got to be me. I'm going to assert my independence. This is me being myself. So I'm going to do what needs to be done when I say it needs to be done. So the defier is one that you need to write down, and here's the question. Do I put things off because I think, hey, I'm special, I'm unique, I'm one of a kind? Is that you? So, yes or no, next to the defier. Just mark that down, and then let's look at the last one. The fifth one, the overdoer. Yeah, you knew I was coming for you, didn't I? The overdoer. These people procrastinate because they've taken on way too much. In church work, I tend to call this the people who create the one more thing ministry. You know, because we got to do one more thing. Oh, yeah, I'll do it. I'm already tied up, 6 or 7 nights out of the week, but I can do it. Just pile it on. We expect ministers to do this, sadly, but we do. We think, well, they work down there. That's what we pay them for. No, you don't pay them to be a robot for 24 hours a day. I mean, here's the reality. The overdoers, these people take on way too much. They're unwilling to stick to priorities. They have very unfocused goals. They have huge, long to-do lists, and they actually think they'll get them done. I mean, they honestly believe that they will get them done. They don't know how to tell time realistically. I know these people, okay? I go out, I've got to fly out to Los Angeles on Tuesday. My car can about drive itself from LAX to Burbank. I have made that hike so many times, I know how to do it. I know all the ins and outs, I know all the shortcuts, and I know that it's going to take at least an hour and a half. I just know. It's 20 miles. It's going to take an hour and a half. But there are people who will honestly tell me, oh, LAX to Burbank, you can get there in 45 minutes if there's no traffic. Like, when is there never any traffic on the 405 in Los Angeles? Or these are the people who will tell you, oh, you got to get out to Benton after church? Oh, 20 minutes. Really? Yeah, 20 minutes if there's no traffic. Yeah, exactly. When is there no traffic? When is there no construction? I mean, you and I both know the Highway Transportation Department uses the lanes of a freeway to store those orange barrels, okay? They don't ever move them. They just move them to different lanes to store them in a different spot. I mean, the reality is, folks, these people cannot tell time realistically. They know when they ought to leave the house to do something, but they think that they've got this unforeseen buffer that is not real. They're way too optimistic for what can be done in a given time frame. So, here's the question, and here's what I want to ask you. Do I commit myself to so many things that I can't find time for them all? Now, on your sheet, overdoer, yes or no. Does that apply to you? Do I commit myself to so many things that I just cannot find time for them all? All right. Now, here's the truth time, okay? I told you you don't have to share this with anybody. This is going to be simple. And for those of you who just have been defying me for 4 weeks, let me show you. This is how you raise your hand, okay? It's just a simple upward motion. I promise you, if you've had rotator cuff surgery, you're exempt from this part with that arm. But here's my question. How many of you circled at least yes to at least one of those? Just curious. Okay. All right. Most of you. Okay. Put your hands down. How about 2? How many of you circled 2? Okay. Good. Put them down. How about 3? Okay. Put them down. What about 4? All right. Okay. Anyone get a perfect score? Anyone circle 5? All right. Usually there's at least one. Now, here's my question. Does that make you uncomfortable at all? When we put a name to it, see, here's the problem, and this is what we don't oftentimes do in church. We don't name things. We oftentimes will talk around certain things so that nobody gets upset, but we don't often name them and say, this is an overdoer. If this is you, here's your problem. We don't like to do that. We oftentimes get a little more, we maneuver around it a little bit more. So here's what I want to do today. You see the effect of this. You see why having a phone buzzing in your pocket, a tablet in front of you, a computer on one side. I mean, literally, folks, when I work 5 days out of the week, I have a laptop on the right, a big other second computer in front of me, and a tablet to my left. I'm a 3-screener, and guess what I've done? This is so sad because the Sullivans know this because they've seen it, and others are going to just say, Mark, you are so wrong to do this. I installed a TV on a swivel mount to come out, so I've got a 4th screen, so I feel like a stock trader, but I'm not trading anything, okay? I'm just sitting there. I got news going on one screen, and I've got things happening everywhere. Here's the reality. You understand why this could consume so much of our time, that stuff that really needs to be done doesn't get done, don't you? I mean, you can get that, right? I wanted to talk about the cause of procrastination, which are these 5 things, typically among us. Now what I want to do is let's just take the rest of the time and talk about what do we do about it. Because it's pointless for me. I'd feel like those guys from the UPS commercial, They come in and say, well, here are all your problems. Okay, what do we do? Well, I don't know. I mean, we don't really fix your problems. We just tell you what's wrong. I'm not going to do that. Let me give you some examples, some things that might help, hopefully. Because honestly, we've got to put a dent in some of these things. So let's talk about how do we overcome these things. And the first one's pretty simple, okay? The first 2 are actually pretty simple. The first 2 are stop and start. I'm going to ask you to stop something. I'm going to ask you to start something. And then there are a couple other things that I'd like to throw out to you. So stop excusing procrastination in your life. That's a big one, folks, because we tend to want to excuse this behavior all the time. And you've heard the phrases, oh, that's just who they are. Oh, they're always late. Or you might even say it about yourself. Oh, that's just who I am. That's just the person I am. Oh, that's just how I operate. We've got to stop excusing this behavior. The failure to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. We're going to have to take a step back from excusing that behavior and start, and this is the second one, start today. Act today. Find the little things that you can do different. I'm not asking you to eat the whale in one bite, okay? Find a little morsel that you want to chew on first. Find one thing that you can start to deal with today and act today. What is one of those things that you have been putting off? Now, this probably means you need to go through your list and validate a few things, meaning you need to go through and see, okay, does this even apply anymore? But once you do that, find those things that are important and pick one. Don't pick 50. Don't look at, if you're like me, sometimes you look at the to-do list and you think, it's just too long. It has fatigued me, honestly, to even look at this list. Therefore, I shall go watch TV. Behold, I gave you a little King James there. But here's the reality. Sometimes I look at the list and I just get scared at the list. Find one thing. Start today. Act today. Just on one thing. We've got to stop excusing it and start acting. Does that make sense? Let's move to the third thing. The third thing is pretty severe. I must ruthlessly prioritize my life. We're going to have to start ruthlessly prioritizing our life. We're going to have to say no to a lot of good things. And that's tough for good church people to do. I mean, let's be honest. You are running crazy, you're working, you've got kids in 80 different directions, on and on and on, and then you get the call. And you know what the call is, right? It's the call of, hey, so-and-so just had a baby. Could you take a meal over to them on Thursday night? And you just feel too bad to say, I just don't have time. So you say yes. And then what happens? For the next 2 nights, it becomes a stressor in your household because now you've got this extra meal you've got to cook, buy, transport, deliver, and everything else while moving everybody else around in your household. You've been there. I've been there. We've all done it. And it's okay to have those feelings, but it is also okay to say no. There, I said it. In church, it is okay to say no every once in a while. In fact, to be healthier people, we're going to have to start saying no to some good stuff. I'm not saying that the things that are trying to rip away at your time are bad things. No, usually it's the good things, and that's why you want to do them. But we have such an ingrained problem saying no to things that we take on way too much. I want to share this with you. USA Today published an article a few years back, and I don't often read USA Today, but when it's thrown outside my hotel room, I pick it up and I read through it. USA Today had an article, and they asked this question: how many hours a day does the average person need to fill in the blank? Now, that's a D. Yeah, you can see it up there. What they did was they asked experts in the field of sleep, experts in the field of childhood development, experts in the field of financial management, experts in all of these fields. They went one by one and basically said, how many hours a day does the average person need to spend on these things? And they just had a list, and they said not an Olympian, not a star athlete, not someone who is just over the top IQ, just an average American. How much time do they need to spend sleeping, for example? How much time do they need to spend exercising? How much time do they need to spend reading and studying with their kids? How much time does the average person need to spend on financial management? These are just some of the examples of things that they ask. And so they went to experts on sleep and said, how many hours a night should someone sleep? And so they gave them the answer. How many hours, how much time each day should someone spend exercising? Now, for some of you, anything above a minute, and for me, for a long time, it was too much, or, I couldn't quite work it into my day. Exercising is one of those things we tend to procrastinate about, okay? How much time do we need to spend reading to our kids? How much time do we need to spend studying? How much time do we need to spend in personal reflection? All of these things. They ask all of these experts in the field. And do you know what the result was? When they tallied it all up, 36 hours a day. That's how much time just the average person needed to spend on these typical life skills. 36 hours a day. I don't have to be a genius in math to know that's more than what I've got. 36 hours a day is what they said that you should spend on these typical, mundane, everyday, average tasks. Folks, is it any wonder that we procrastinate? Is it any wonder that we put things off? Even just doing the typical things, we don't even have enough time to do. All of the things that the experts tell us, they're designed to help us. All they do is they depress us because we know we don't have the time. So, stop excusing it. Start acting today. Ruthlessly prioritize our life. And then the fourth one. The fourth one is, for me, pretty telling. It's where I want to camp out and end today. Okay, I got like 9 minutes, so bear with me. Understand that your life is very short. Oh, we forget this one. Understand that your life is very short. There was a great movie, came out in the 80s, called City Slickers. I'm going to show you one clip, okay? And Chad, this is where we'll need a little bit more volume so you can actually hear it. There's a scene where Billy Crystal, who is an advertising executive, actually goes and speaks to his kids' class. I want you to listen real closely to what he says, because I think you'll find a little bit of truth in it. Take a look.
Value this time in your life, kids. Because this is the time in your life when you still have your choices. And it goes by so fast. When you're a teenager, you think you can do anything, and you do. Your 20s are a blur. 30s, you raise your family, you make a little money, and you think to yourself, What happened to my 20s? 40s, you grow a little pot belly, you grow another chin. The music starts to get too loud. One of your old girlfriends from high school becomes a grandmother. 50s, you have a minor surgery. You'll call it a procedure, but it's a surgery. 60s, you'll have a major surgery. The music is still loud, but it doesn't matter because you can't hear it anyway. The 70s, you and the wife retire to Fort Lauderdale. You start eating dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You have lunch around 10, breakfast the night before. Spend most of your time wandering around malls looking for the ultimate soft yogurt and muttering, how come the kids don't call? How come the kids don't call? The 80s, you'll have a major stroke. You end up babbling to some Jamaican nurse who your wife can't stand, but who you call Mama. Any questions?
Sounds pretty accurate to me, doesn't it? And when you look at the reaction on these kids' faces, you know, really? I mean, some of the things, I didn't believe it. I saw that movie when I was a teenager, okay? It's true, okay? I'm just up almost to the 50s, okay? And you know, having the minor procedure, you know, the thing you'll call a procedure, but it's really a surgery. I mean, here's the reality, folks. You know, we have got to understand that our life, it's really pretty short. You want to get perspective? I've got a small group that meets in my house, and we have been rereading and reacquainting ourselves with Ecclesiastes. Now, you talk about just depressing, okay? I used to joke when I was in youth ministry, you want to settle a teenager down, just set them down and read them half a book of Ecclesiastes and tell them, well, you're going to die soon, so just get over it. I mean, you know, the reality is that our life is short. And as much as we want to think we're important, give it 2 generations. No one's going to know who we are. And that's the reality. So how am I going to maximize my time while I'm here? There's a great psalm, and this is what I'd like to start to close out with, Psalm 90. And you've heard this, I know, but just listen to it again. Lord, you've been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They're like new grass in the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it is dry and withered. And thus we start understanding, hey, our life isn't going to last that long. And then he uses this great phrase right toward the end of the psalm. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. It's an old accounting principle. You number the things that are important to you. You inventory them, you number them, you identify where they are, and you know where they are. And the psalmist is saying, hey, God, teach us to number our days. Help us gain a heart of wisdom through numbering our days. The King James, I believe, says, teach us to number our days aright. This is a beautiful passage in the Psalms to me, which makes me think that I haven't spent enough time numbering my days. And so at the risk of becoming a tear bag in the last 4 minutes I've got, I want to share with you one of the most poignant things that I have ever read. And it's from an author named Mary Jean Iron. And she wrote this essay called Gift from a Hairdryer. And for a guy who has married off a daughter and remembers raising a daughter and a son, it's tough to read, but I want to ask you to bear with me and just listen closely to it, because Miss Iron is a lady who actually wrote this essay, and she took a moment when she was blow drying her daughter's hair. She took the opportunity to number that day. And here's what she says. Comb and dry, comb and dry. Soon I won't be able to do this anymore, you say to yourself, knowing that the little straight bob must inevitably yield to grown-up hairstyles and ugly straighteners. What will she be like at 14? Where will her hair be blowing then? And 16 and 18? Do you suppose the boys will love to watch her hair blow as you do now? And some of them will feel it on their faces. And one of them will marry her. And there will be her hair, perfect under that veil. And there will be her hair spread out on his pillow, and oh, you just hate him a little. And you wonder where he is at this moment, whether he will be good to her, whether they'll grow old together, and that gold brown hair will be gray, and you will be gone, and then she will be gone. All flesh is like grass. It springs up in the morning, and by evening it's dried and gone. You'll be gone, and she'll be gone, this very hair that now your fingers smooth. And all the tears in the world swim for a second in your eyes as you suddenly snatch the plug out of the socket and gather her into your arms, burying your face in that warm hair as if you could seal this moment against all time. But you can't. You can't seal this moment against all time because we are like grass. Generation after generation after generation comes and comes to an end and says, where did another summer go? How did another school year get here so fast? Where did the grade school years go? Where did middle school go? Where have they gone? How did the owner of this hair and this little head and these little hands, how did she grow up so fast? And so wise people throughout the centuries have fallen to their knees before God, the God who lives from everlasting to everlasting, and they say, God, teach me to number my days. Friends, listen, this is a deadly word. It is one that can rob you of the ability to live in this moment right now. And my prayer, my hope is that in the spin of our society today and all of the blessings that we have, we don't miss the opportunity to do what the psalmist says and just number our days and take a pause and appreciate what we have, and let's do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. Let's pray and then we'll be done. Father, you know that I am not the right person to talk about putting things off. And I praise you for the life you've given me and for, truthfully, all of the relationships you've given me with so many in this room. Father, it has been so good to see so many wonderful people again. And Father, my prayer for them, and I think our collective prayer as a people, is that you would help us, Father, truly. We want to pray, please, teach us to number our days and expose to us a heart of wisdom and understanding. We love you and we praise you and we thank you through Christ. Amen.